Welcome to Deadly Night Tales. This is The Final Trip by Sam Sherwood. It was probably the third year running that I'd seen him at the hostel in Palenque, but I don't think he even remembered me. Middle-aged, quiet, and guarded, I was the exact opposite of the kind of woman he sought out during his long stays at the site. A trust fund kid disguised in Thai fisherman pants, he was more focused on hooking up with the dreadlock girls that bust in every day from other parts of Mexico popular with travelers, like Tulum and San Cristobal. His name was Michael, but I only found that out later when I read it in the news. Working seasonally in Pennsylvania, I tried to get away to different places every winter. Puerto Escondido, Montezuma, Chiang Mai. But Palenque was the first place that I had started to feel like a home away from home. Joaquim, the jovial manager at the camp, was around my age. He allowed me to stay in one of the wooden cabins for free in exchange for hanging out during the day and giving tarot readings to other travelers. Mornings were slow. Hardly any of them were awake, but I still loved to people watch, to nurse a cold glass of papaya, to bathe in the soothing orchestra of cicada chirps and bird calls from the surrounding jungle. Michael, the guy, must have liked Palenque too. He was also one of the first to wake up in the mornings. I'd watch him leave his cabin in a rush to fix up his Japanese topknot and apply a subtle hint of eyeliner in the mirror outside the bathrooms. Then I observed him visibly relax his body language, ready to engineer another chance meeting with one of the new girls that arrived, tired yet starry-eyed, from the overnight bus. Many times I overheard him say that he felt like he'd met them before someplace, leaving a long pause that could be filled in with all kinds of cosmic permutations. More than once, I saw girls respond with looks of open-mouthed wonder, some even growing into expressions of full-blown karmic recognition. Despite my interest in tarot reading and hanging out in chill places, I didn't think of myself primarily as a hippie. But it did bother me, the super efficient way that, like some kind of sales guru, he identified all the predictable hippie personality traits that we prescribe to and was using them ruthlessly to his own advantage. One day he humbly let slip to a table full of enthralled young women that he was the owner of an Instagram page called #self-love, before commanding their undivided attention with a lecture on the spiritual importance of surrounding yourself only with beautiful souls, beings of pure light, who allow you to unapologetically give yourself the love and nurture that you deserve. It made me feel old and cynical, watching his routine from the outside and inwardly snarking at his behavior. But some tiny part of me almost admired the amount of grift he put into his enlightenment act. And it never failed to make me laugh that in Palenque or any other place frequented by spiritual chicks on vacation, it really was that easy to get laid. The first girl he hooked up with in that particular winter season was a blonde Argentinian named Cieli. He brought her over to my table, asking me for a reading for the first time. I wondered why his sudden interest in tarot, and then I noticed the all-seeing eye tattooed on her wrist. I invited him to choose his first card, and he hovered his hand mystically over them, affecting a pensive look as though he could somehow feel the contents through his palm. I feel like this is the one I meant to have. Wow, mouthed Cieli. I turned it. The Four Swords. Disregard the opinions and emotional biases of others. Open yourself to your own deepest insights. Contemplate the dust of your ancestors so that you might truly understand your place in the passage of time. I thought this card meant to be exhaustion, to be tired, interrupted Shaylee. This is how we read Arcana in Argentina. I guess it can be, if it's turned in the reverse position from the perspective of the chooser. In this case, it's upside down or the right way round. Michael tucked a strand of hair behind his ear before stretching out an arm that was adorned with Moroccan henna art and languidly pointing at his second card. The tower, I said, revealing a stone turret being struck by lightning. The combination of the two cards gave me a rare, visceral feeling in my gut. Is that bad? Asked Shaylee, with a surprisingly maniacal glint in her eye. Not necessarily, on its own. The tower can represent great change and upheaval, which could be good in the future tense. But the tower can also represent the collective voice of madness or delusion, being released from its hiding place in the human psyche. This might seem like a path to disaster, but it can be avoided if the combi bus that would take them to the nearby Mayan temples rolled into camp and sounded its horn. Shaylee was leaning fully over the table, absorbed in the reading, but the guy had lost interest. He reached for the card closest to him before an urgent shout from Joaquim made him scuff it against the table and drop it to the ground. Minibus is going! Sorry, he said, standing up and self-consciously fixing his man bun. He now had something even more powerful and sacred to share with Shaylee. This has been amazing. I feel so blessed. Shaylee, shall we go? Be careful. Have fun, I said. He nodded distractedly and led the girl to the combi, ready to take her on the same tour he'd made for so many others before her. Looking back, I feel like I should have shouted out, called them back. But you wouldn't have renounced the tour on the basis of a gut feeling. Besides, I wasn't sure if I actually believed in the tarot myself. I was only interested in it as a way of keeping Granny May's memory alive after she passed. And I only did it here in Palenque as a way of bonding with travelers that were mostly younger than myself. The events of Michael's final excursion would become legend in the camp. National news back in the U.S. simply reported it as a terrible tragedy in the land of the Maya. But little by little, all the details filtered back to us from Shaylee and the other girls that were there as the events unfolded. Shaylee and the guy had done the usual tour around the 5 glyph-covered monuments and spent time with a group of Israeli girls that were also staying at a hostel. Together, they had come across a self-confessed shaman outside the archaeological site, who sold them some magic mushrooms. Shaylee was keen to paint the picture that the mushrooms had been forced onto them by the guy, but that didn't chime with my experience of the placid natives that sat cross-legged at the head of the waterfall trail, greeting tourists as they passed by. Sure, sometimes the shamanic guys used karmic awakening sessions as a way to have sex with gullible female tourists and then get paid for it, but aggressively pushing hallucinogenics wasn't their style. So, at some point in the afternoon, Shaylee had the idea to return just before the site closed and hide on the upper floor of the palace observation tower. It's usually off limits to tourists, but can be reached if you climb over the external tomb of the Mayan ruler Pakal the Great and into a previously closed burial chamber. I knew the chamber well. Joaquim had once taken me there with the permission of a security guard he was friendly with. Aside from the newly opened wall and the rear access ladder to the tower that had been built for archaeologists, there were originally only 2 openings in or out of the sealed chamber. One was a narrow channel built below the sarcophagus, allowing a stream of water to flow through. The other was a narrow hole which opened into something called the psychoduct, a stone flue that traveled all the way up to the roof. A blank-eyed effigy of the Mayan king stared up from his sarcophagus, from where it had been carved alongside a tapestry of symbols and glyphs. When I stood there with Joaquin, the combination of the lightly evaporating water and an upwards draft of air had given me the chills, and the curious sensation that I was inside a living, breathing organism. Even now, when I think about the inscription on the psychoduct, it makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. The passage of water and the opening of the duct were built to allow the soul of the dead king, Hinit Shana Pakal, to depart his tomb on the White Breath Road. Shaylee's suggestion to climb up the rear access ladder and camp out on top of the tower had been too much for the Israeli girls, who tried to talk her out of it. But Michael submitted to the idea because, according to the girls, Shaylee basically said that he was close-minded and boring if he didn't do it with her. Most of what happened after that came out of the police investigation and later media reports. After the guards locked up the site, Shaylee and an already nervous Michael crept out of their hiding place and consumed the mushrooms, with the intent of enjoying the emergence of the stars in the night sky. Shaylee told us that, while making out, they had heard ferocious roaring noises that bounced around, coming from every direction in the darkness. Michael, in his impressionable state, started totally freaking out and stumbling around to find an escape route. But after hearing a sharp cry, Shaylee lost all sight and sound of him. He had disappeared. She scrambled down the ladder and began a frantic search of the grass 5 stories below, where she believed that he had fallen, but found no trace of him. Panicked and confused, she blundered her way out of the temple grounds and onto the road, which she followed all the way back to the hostel, arriving back in the early hours of the morning. And the horrifying noises were explainable to anyone who knows the deceptively fierce roar of the Central American howler monkeys, quite common visitors to the Mayan temples. Once Joaquin reported Michael missing, park security guards were able to explain his disappearance. He tripped and fallen head first down the psychoduct, to the point that the narrowing passageway was able to catch him and wedge him in place. There he hung, upside down all night, listening to the watery passage of the white breath below him, before being slowly asphyxiated by the weight of his own internal organs. But there is one more troubling thing I never mentioned to any of the guys at the camp, out of concern that it would just seem like a cynical comment at the end of a very sad affair. Just after their minibus left that morning, I walked around the side of the table and stooped over, peeling his 3rd abandoned tarot card from the humid floor tiles. The card that he'd chosen was the Fool, reversed.
Thank you for listening to Deadly Night Tales. Please like, subscribe and follow us on YouTube and Instagram /Deadly Night Tales, and write us a nice review to help others find our show. If you've written a creepy story and would like a chance to have it read on the show, we welcome submissions. Please see the show notes for guidelines. This episode was narrated by Leah Thorley, production, sound and editing by Sam Sherwood. The theme tune is Black Spot by Costals.net. Good night, sleep well, and see you next time.